Thanks for bearing with us as we are just a few minutes late getting started tonight, still trying to make sure that we're doing things procedurally properly so our attorney won't get on my case. But seriously, we welcome you tonight, and at this time, please rise and join with us in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And at this time, we'll see if our superintendent has comments for tonight.
I do not this evening, so I pass it back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back. Some of you who attend these or watch on TV noted I did miss the last meeting. Had a wonderful vacation that I thought I was taking at the quiet time of the year, and then we hear about budget deliberations and not to mention who's running from where, and all that's been resolved except budget. So I'm looking forward to getting back into the swing of things. Most of our, well, not most of our schools, we have had a large number of schools that have already started. We've got another group of schools that are coming online here within the next week with our teachers and our students coming in. So we hope things are moving smoothly for them. We're hoping parents are excited that their students are returning to school or will be returning to school. And we hope that our students are excited about their new year and looking forward to all of the opportunities and the excitement of meeting up with friends again and all of that. I remember it well, and it was always very pleasurable. So we wish them the best of luck as we get started for the year. And with that, we'll start to my left with board member comments. We do have Dr. Martin, who is joining us virtually tonight or remotely. And as I get to him after Mr. Sutton, he does wish to make comments tonight. So, Mr. Sutton. Okay. And we'll see if we have Mr. Martin, Dr. Martin, online.
I'm here.
There we go.
Do you hear me? Very
Yes.
good. Well, welcome. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm out actually at Ohio Wesleyan University helping my son move into college. So it's an exciting time in our family's life, as I'm sure it is for many. And I wish a great year for all of our graduates who are off to college. Just wanted to briefly, in addition to welcome, note that the last week, I had a wonderful opportunity to run 2 professional development workshops for chemistry high school teachers, largely Wake County teachers, but also teachers from across the state. Listening to the discussion in work session, it's always painful to hear that the professional development budgets are cut. I do run this one out of my own personal pocket and through the support of my department. But just working with the teachers is a very exciting and energizing opportunity. We've got a lot of fantastic folks who really are looking to, dig into what we have in our strategic plan, the critical thinking and creativity. And if anybody wants to see a little bit of the fun that we worked on, you might have wondered about the green Olympic pools. Well, one of our teachers actually works a summer job helping maintain the chemical balance in the pools. And of course, so strange serendipity because our teachers aren't paid where they need to be. She was working at the pool. But that brought the question to us. And so we spent a group of 4 of us on the one team, spent time trying to figure out the green Olympic pool problem. And actually that information can be found on YouTube. If you look for Green Olympic Pools Explained, you'll see some the results of creative work from our teachers. So it's a great example. We call it Rio World Chemistry, but it's a great example of how our teachers can really jump in, engage, and are extremely creative. And these are lessons that are going to come back into our classrooms over and over again. So with investment in professional development, we're going to see things grow even more. So I just wanted to share that, and a big shout out to all the teachers. Had a great week working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Ms. Felton?
Yes, I do want to just make a comment about how how much staff and this board have worked and looked at the budget and the very difficult decisions that have to be made when you have to make budget cuts, whether or not they are in your family budget or something as large as Wake County Schools. I also wanted to welcome Troop 152 from Cary, who are here to observe a public meeting, and they chose us, which I think is very commendable. But anyway, and I also want to make the comment to the young men who were in this group that some years ago I attended a political presidential rally. I won't tell you the year or who was running. But anyway, it was probably what got me interested in politics. And starting with high school, didn't do a whole lot in college, but study. No, that's not true. But anyway, it was just very interesting. And ever since then, I think that citizenship and communication is what I've tried to do throughout my life. So one last comment. I have a former colleague and a friend who is a substitute teacher, and she had her first visit to Pine Hollow Middle School. And of course, she said, "Oh, it is really nice." And everybody in there, she couldn't quite get used to the mushroom seats that the students sit on, but she said it was very impressive, and it's just always exciting to start a new school. And that's one thing that Wake County continues to do, is to open new schools. So that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Felton. Mr. Hill? Okay. Ms. Evans? Mr. Fletcher?
Well, let me share a couple of thoughts, if I may. Again, also welcome to Troop 152 and young men and leaders who are here, and family support as well. Glad that you can participate tonight. Couple of things. I neglected in our last meeting to say thank you to the Cary Chamber for having Dr. Merrill and myself have some presentation time at their planning conference. And that's an organization that continues to be a strong supporter of the school district, and had an opportunity to talk with them. I also was a participant at the Garner Chamber Connect event and participated with them on their bus tour and other events there. And Garner is hopping. Business growth. There are 1,000 residential units that are in the process of being permitted and built south of White Oak down to McCullers Crossroads 1010. So good things are happening in Garner from their economic standpoint. Thank you to the Cary Chamber again for their partners dinner. I think several of us were there and appreciate that. Last week, Dr. Rodney Trice and I made a presentation and had discussion, if you will, with about 100 realtors. And the topic was diversity in Wake County. And we covered what's happening in terms of the general population, what's happening about diversity in the schools, factors that affect diversity in our schools, which would include choices that parents have, as well as some things that really focused on what realtors can do if they're trying to sell a house in a portion of the county where there may be a school that's not as good as some might want it to be. And they're typically dealing with a national ranking of some kind, or they may be dealing with the North Carolina state ranking system that we've all kind of believe it to be a challenging piece of information. The response from this group was very strong. I appreciate Dr. Trice's support and contribution to the presentation and to being there with the realtors. We really didn't have much idea of what we were going to encounter and how broad the topic could be, but we dealt with diversity, equity, access, student assignment, stayed in that realm, and it was a very good event. And I think it may be an opportunity for us, kind of a model that we might choose as a board to use as we continue community engagement and building support for our commitment to have every child in our community prepared for success and graduation. And it will take our entire community to help us accomplish that. So I'm very excited about that. And that'll conclude my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Ms. Kushner?
Thank you. Good evening. to my colleagues and Chair Benton. I wanted to thank the Girl Scouts of the Coastal Pines for hosting a town hall meeting that I was able to attend and talked with some very bright girls from not only the Triangle but down in Fayetteville. They were and down east, girls who'd spent the week at camp and learning from women in our community about leadership and empowerment. It was great fun. Also wanted to thank our security department and superintendent leadership staff for having the School Resource Officer Summit that was held today. There were more than 200 SROs, principals, APs, and other staff who attended that summit. One of the programs that was able to present today, it was the diversion program that the county court system has begun with Wake County Schools. In the first 3 months, 51 students were between the ages of 16, 17, and 18 were diverted who committed a school-based offense instead of being caught up in the adult court system, because a 16 and 17-year-old in North Carolina were the only state that charged 16, 17-year-olds as adults. They were able to be diverted into other programs that they could still be held accountable for their offenses, but be able to get mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, do community service, volunteer in various diversion programs that are approved by the court system. And it's off to a great start. They were able to present that information to the SROs today, as well as some other information that we can improve the school community relations with our municipal law enforcement and make sure that our schools remain safe and well run, but also places where kids can have a second chance. So I'm glad that has taken place today. Also appreciated the attention to the budget in work session and look forward to the discussion. I think it bears repeating that 94% of the funding that we have in our budget goes to our schools. So when we are faced with a shortfall, it's hard to see where we can cut without affecting our schools. So we are struggling with those decisions, and I appreciate the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes comments for tonight. You've had a chance to review our consent agenda. So at this time, do I have, I'm sorry, let me back up. We need to approve our meeting agenda tonight. So we have do I have a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All in favor say aye.
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 And we heard Dr. Martin also vote yes. So at this time, we'll move to public comment. And we have one person signed up to make comments tonight. That's Miss Rachel Eitzen.
Good evening.
My name is Rachel Eitzen. I'm a representative of the Teamsters Union, and I'm here tonight on behalf of our members who are school bus drivers and other support personnel to talk with you about the budget. Dr. Merrill, we appreciate you putting into the budget an additional 1.5% increase from county funds so that classified employees will receive a 3% wage increase this year. And this district's commitment to classified employees, we just want to thank you for that. We can't ever recover what happened from 2009. There's been such few legislative pay increases, but with the 3% wage increase last school year, and then hopefully with this board's commitment to adopt the budget to include a 3% wage increase this year, that will go a long way to showing your commitment to employees who are underemployed and such a valuable asset to the school district. There's a lot of discussion about teachers, which it should be, but there's so many important personnel that make this school district work and play such an important role to the education of our children. So in advance, I'm sure that you will remain that in the budget and keep a 3% wage increase, and we would just wanted to be here tonight to thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes public comments tonight. So now I can go into my other direction, and that is you've had a chance to review the consent agenda. So at this time, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The consent agenda items are approved. We have an action item tonight to consider the passing of our operating budget for this school year. And based on how that discussion goes, there may be a request for a waiver of Board Policy 8101. So Dr. Nieder, Mr. Nieder, please present.
We've got two précis on your agenda tonight. The first deals with waiving board policy 8101 based upon the likely final budget exceeding the 50% threshold of fund balance use. And the second précis is the actual requesting of the approval of the addition that Ms. Eitzen just referenced in her public comments for her support staff, and then the recommended adjustments. Based upon the work session that we just concluded, it would appear that the remaining item before the board that they want to discuss, although I'm not trying to be presumptuous, there may be more, has to do with the recommendation that was included in the staff's recommendations related to reducing frequency of custodial services in schools. And I want to clarify here in the board meeting, as we did in the work session, that all schools continue to have custodians 5 days a week. The only change that was being recommended, and I'm not trying to make light of it in any way, shape, or form, was that the frequency of cleaning and sweeping of the schools would be reduced from 3 to 2. Rest facilities and everything else would continue on the other schedule. And with that, it would be my suggestion to turn it back to the board for discussion of the different options we presented and see if you can come to consensus. And if you can, fine. And if not, we'll guide you through the next steps.
Questions and comments, and we do have Dr. Martin wanting to make a comment or raise a question. So I'm going to let him go first while the rest of you are thinking. Dr. Martin.
Thank you, Tom. I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the discussion during the work session. I think I would lean toward the option that Ms. Evans mentioned, the scenario 3, option 2. I too am concerned about the instructional supply reduction. As you, Mr. Benton, noted, there's a huge difference depending on the school. Some of our lower resource schools, every little instructional supply dollar is huge. So I'm reticent to cutting that. I'm also a bit concerned about the community schools funding. I think I heard that you're just looking at the central office portion of that. Some time ago, I had asked for an accounting. I'd love to see an accounting overall of the formula. What of those dollars gets dispersed to the schools? What stays at central office? Because I've heard back from some people at the schools that, well, I've heard two sides. One, they're not sure that expenses for renting are fully recovered. And then second, I have heard some schools want to potentially go more on the entrepreneurial side and say, hey, can we actually market the community use of schools as a revenue source? So I'm comfortable, I suppose, tapping into some of those dollars, but I really would appreciate a more full accounting of this to know how that money is distributed, to make sure costs are met in the schools, and then also, so we can find out whether the entrepreneurial idea is even possible.
Can I comment?
Yes, Mr. Nieder.
Thank you. I just want to let the board know that Chief Communications Officer Tim Simmons and I actually spoke subsequent to your work session to basically re-review the overall formulas that were developed some years ago, I want to say likely some decades ago, and see if what was put in place decades ago is still pertinent to our district today. We certainly can bring that back to the board as well, but our plan is to do just such a review.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions, comments? Ms. Kushner.
Thank you. I'm wondering if scenario 3, option 2 would be a good place for us to start.
Okay.
Because a budget is not set in stone. A budget's a plan going forward. We can see if this works for our schools at the school level, and then if there are concerns that that level of custodial services is not adequate, we can revisit, but perhaps it might be a good starting point for us to reach a compromise.
Okay. So again, to be clear, y'all are suggesting scenario three,
option
which
2.
makes elementary school classroom floors cleaned every other day, or 5 times over a 2-week period, because not everyone is able to see the information
Yes,
that we
thank you.
have. I think Mr. Fletcher was actually next, and then Ms. Evans. Okay, Ms. Evans?
Thank you. And I just want to, for the public's availability, I wanted to say that the reason I support this particular option is I do understand why we want to have the floors cleaned more often in our elementary schools, and so I think that's a good compromise. First of all, in scenario 3, we're actually proposing the 5 days every 2 weeks in the elementary schools, but we're still keeping the middle schools and high schools cut back to the 2 days. But I'm in favor of it, as Mr. Martin said, because of several things. I really am not comfortable with hitting the supplies budget any more than we're already having to, certainly based on articles like I read in today's newspaper where, families struggle and teachers struggle to have the supplies they need for their classroom where we are already. And then just being fiscally responsible, I'm also not comfortable in taking the fund balance down too far, or taking the community and schools funding, which is one-time funding, not recurring funding, I should say, non-recurring funding, down too far. So those are my reasons for finding that this was a good compromise place that I'm comfortable with. So I just wanted to state that.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Evans. Additional questions, comments? So, Ms. Felton?
Okay, well, I too concur about scenario 3, option 2, and for the same reasons that have already been stated. I mean, I know my daughter is a teacher and how much money, she's not in Wake County, how much money she personally spends on instructional supplies for her students. And it's very expensive to go shopping for kids when they go back to school, and teachers have all kinds of lists. So I would not want to cut that instructional fee. And then, of course, the other things, I agree about the community schools. You can't count on it. You don't want to do something too much. And I am happy that it does state that the elementaries would be vacuumed at least every other day, or which I think is really necessary because most of those schools have carpets, and we know what it is to keep carpets clean, and it's very necessary also for that age group. So just lending my support also to that particular scenario.
Okay. Mr. Hill?
I think it was a few meetings back where I expressed a great deal of frustration about the fact that we're even talking about this.
Right.
And I would like to express that again. In looking at the various scenarios, first I'd like to thank staff for bringing this back to us at with fairly short notice. I think the different options. I'm still very, very frustrated where we find ourselves with the budget and having to be talking about how often we're cleaning classrooms. I'm a little more comfortable with the fact that, at least at the elementary level, we can try and limit the cuts. But I think if, I mentioned in work session, I think it's just about every elementary school is where you go into the classrooms, and that's where you see the kids and the teachers down on the floor. The other frustration is, having been on the board since '07, when we had our rooms cleaned 5 days a week, and having been a teacher in Wake County and a principal in Wake County when my room was cleaned 5 days a week, that does add to the atmosphere where the learning and teaching takes place. And again, I want to express my frustration that the budget right now, at what is viewed as the second year, going in maybe the third year of our recovery after the Great Recession, that we're talking about how often we're going to vacuum our rooms. But being a realist, I can support that option, at least at the elementary level at this point, but I'm not doing it very happily.
Additional comments?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Fletcher?
I'll echo Mr. Hill's comments. I was very much interested in seeing support added back for middle school arts. That's been taken out of our expansion budget. As we press forward with using more digital technology in our schools and digital instructional materials, needing those instructional technical support people, and the expansion item has already been pulled to get to where we are about this discussion of classrooms. Classroom cleaning, we can't only do what we've been doing and expect the different results, and so it's frustrating to me in that regard. I'm not sure what the appropriate thing is to move us forward right now. If a motion is in order, I'd be happy to make it relative to accept staff's recommendations for how to cover the gap using scenario 3, option 2 as the substitute mechanism based on the board's previous concerns.
If I could interject, and that may be a perfectly acceptable motion, just one step removed. If there seems to be consensus on that issue, then I would suggest you go back to the waiver of policy, which you'll need to do first, and then that issue, then you can take up the issue if all members that feel like they've comfortably discussed the resolution, then you could move forward with that motion.
Mr. Chair, if you think if we've reached consensus, I'd be happy to withdraw that motion and move that we approve the waiver of policy relative to fund balance appropriation.
Second. Okay. Additional questions or comments on the motion to waive the policy on the fund balance? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we have waived the fund balance policy.
Then I'll restate the motion to approve the budget with the recommended changes that staff has prepared for us. We reviewed through work session today, and as modified by choosing the scenario 3, option 2 for the change in vacuuming and sweeping in our schools.
Okay. Questions and comments? Mr. Sutton? Okay. Ms. Kushner?
I wanted to thank my colleagues and staff for the discussion and the excellent attention. I also echo Mr. Hill's frustration that we had to go through all this. But I am glad that we have focused on our teachers, our support staff, our administrators, that we're focusing on improving salaries across the district. I am frustrated that the working conditions of our teachers and staff were not able to improve as much. I think we need to stay focused on that, and both at the local and state level, to advocate for increased funding in those areas. But I am glad that we are able to reinstate the full 3% for our support staff and do what we can for our teachers. Thank you.
Additional questions, comments? Before I call for a vote, I want to make a couple of comments myself. One, I think it was very appropriate that you pointed out, Ms. Kushner, this is a living budget. If there's a miracle that happens and we find out that there's additional revenues, we can revisit. Likewise, if we find out that some projections don't hit where we need, we might have to go back and make some adjustments also. I also want to point out the fallacy of an argument that I've heard out in the community, and that is, why are you talking about cutting custodial services $3.6 million when you've got over $1 billion budget? And it's already been alluded to tonight. 94% of that budget goes to schools. We can't really go in and start cutting that. In fact, I don't know what percent of it is probably wrapped up into salaries. So the only way to start cutting those is to cut our local supplement or to cut people, fire. And we're not willing to do that at this point in time, and hopefully not any time in the near future. So when you take that out, we're looking for $17.5 million, and please correct my math here. I was a social studies teacher. We're looking for cutting $17.5 million out of just over $100 million. Because when you take 94% of your just over $1 billion budget, that only leaves you $100 million. Well, that's almost a 20% cut. I mean, that's significant. So these people that keep saying, why can't you find this money somewhere else, needs to understand the challenge of that. We're not finding it out of $1 billion. We're finding $17.5 million out of $100 million. And that's very difficult to do without cutting even deeper into core services and practices that we're needing. It also came out in our meeting when we were talking about instructional supplies. This was during our work session, which y'all missed the big part of that. When we were talking about instructional supplies, and we keep hearing the state talking about how they have increased funding for instructional supplies. They have increased the total amount of money, but they've not increased it per student. When we look at approximately $70 for instructional supplies for our students here in Wake County, $42 of that, well over half, is coming from Wake County. The state funding is still stuck at $28 per student. Now think about that. $28 per student for the year for instructional supplies, and we're supposed to have a state-supported system that provides a free and appropriate education to all of our students. So we need to continue to look at that particular issue. I, too, am so glad that we were able to do something for our non-certified staff members. Dr. Merrill, thank you for doing that, for putting it in. Board members, thank you for being supportive of that. And as we move along, and once we get past this hurdle tonight, we've got to go back to our county commissioners and talk very seriously about the salary structure of our non-certified staff. The commissioners have talked about making sure that county workers have a livable wage, which is $15 an hour as they define it. I'm going to come back and formally ask y'all to prepare a list of how many of our non-certified staff make under $15 an hour. And I think it's going to be surprising and frightening to everything from bus drivers to teacher assistants to cafeteria workers are making significantly below what we classify as a livable wage in this country, and it's got to be addressed. It's just got to be addressed somehow. So with that, unless there are additional comments, I'm going to call for the vote.
I just want to make
Mr.
a
Sutton.
comment. I think we suffer probably sometimes from a perception problem. I think there's perception and there's reality. And as I hear the comments such as frustration and fallacy, I don't want the good things that we were able to do in this budget to be lost. We still saw a significant amount of expansion, support for our elementary support model and other things, the salary increases that we were able to do for our non-certified staff. And oftentimes people don't have the benefit of the information that we have at our disposal when they ask questions about why can't you find a couple of $1 million in what they see as a $1 billion budget. So yes, I think there's a perception and there's the reality of what we're dealing with, and though it's a difficult decision to figure out here about the cleaning and sweeping and instructional supplies and that sort of thing, we are a very fortunate, I think, district and county in an area of the state that is still experiencing quite a bit of economic growth, economic prosperity, and many parts of the county and the state, not the county, but the state that aren't in the same position. And so I think it puts us as policymakers and decision makers often in a very sort of tough predicament. So I just want to echo the fact that I share some of the frustration, but at the same time, there are a lot of good things that we did in this budget. Part of our job as policymakers is having to make these tough decisions, and that's why we're here. And at the end of the day, I'm glad that we are in a position to be able to do some of the things that we've been able to do in this budget and support our teachers and students and the district. So just wanted to make that comment and support the vote.
Last chance, additional comments? Okay. All in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The motion passes and the budget is passed. Thank all of you.
Thank you. And if I could make two comments,
Okay.
follow up. First, as I shared in the work session, we will bring the formal budget resolution back to you in September after we've basically made all the adjustments to the proposed budget that you have now approved. So the beginning balances in our accounts by purpose and function are aligned with those changes. Second, just a technical note, your précis regarding the waiver of board policy, we will revise. You waive board policy, that's all we asked you to do, but the précis does include a dollar amount referenced as the amount of fund balance appropriation in the budget and uses the figure of $10 million. And with what you've just approved, that really becomes $10,400,000. The $7 million from your proposed budget, the $3 million addition in our recommendation, and the additional $400,000 included in your scenario 3 funding option 2. So we will revise that, but it does not change your action on the actual précis. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay. With that, that concludes our open session. Do I have a motion to go? Do I have another? I don't, but anyway,
Mr.
Ms.
Chairman.
Parker,
May I make a motion, Mr. Chairman?
please.
With the Facilities Committee support, Ms. Parker is coming to us to present a name for the new high school in the Fuquay-Varina area. The committee is in full support of Willow Spring High School, and as chairman of the committee, I'd like to recommend the board's approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Any questions, discussion?
My only comment would be that the motion, ultimately, that's fine, that the motion is also consistent with the recommendation from the superintendent that's got some additional language relating to the action, but that's fine.
Okay, all right. All in-
Just a quick question. Do we need to rescind the previous name since we had already named the school?
Yeah, Dr. Martin, that's part of the recommended action on the précis, and so that was the basis for my comment, that the minutes will reflect that the motion is in fact aligned with the recommendation in the précis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Anybody want to hear from Ms. Parker?
We all want to hear from
Always
Ms.
want to
Parker.
hear from Ms. Parker.
Okay,
I defer to Mr. Fletcher. I don't think I could have stated it better.
okay,
The only thing I would note is the town of Fuquay, I've met with staff recently, and they're very appreciative of the board's reconsideration and taking their board's discussion and community input into account.
and is it Willow Spring or Willow Springs?
Willow Spring, singular.
Okay, Ms. Kushner?
Well, that was actually my question. Is the elementary school Willow Springs with plural?
It is.
And should we, and at another time, should we consider making those two names, reconciling those two names? Yes, that's a good word
Okay.
for it. Just wanted to raise that.
All right,
Or we could leave it as is. I just thought I'd raise that point.
okay, but that's not a part of this motion. Okay. Ms. Evans?
I just wanted to make the comment that I'm pleased that the Facilities Committee took this back up and that we got the letter that we got from the town of Fuquay-Varina. And I've always been a proponent for naming schools after historic communities. And so I'm pleased that we've arrived at this place and that it's what everybody in that area seems to want. And so it's a win-win for everyone to name this Willow Spring High School. So I'm happy that we were able to take a step back and reconsider.
Any additional questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes for the new school names.
Thank you.
Now, I can get back to my script. Is there a motion to go into closed session? We're all waiting for you,
There is.
Mr. Sutton.
Make a motion to go into closed session to consider confidential personnel information protected under GS 143-318.11 A1, A3, and A6, and 115C-319, to consult an attorney employed or retained by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privileges provided in GS 143-318.11 A3, to establish or give instructions concerning the board's negotiating position related to a potential acquisition of real property as provided in GS 143-318.11 A5, and to consider confidential student information protected under GS 115C-402 and the Family Educational and Privacy Rights Act, 20 U.S. Code 1232G.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed likewise? We are now in the closed session.
Good night, Jim.